You wrote an incredible book called What's Our Problem? A self-help book for societies. In the beginning, you present this view of human history as a 1,000-page book where each page is 250 years. And it's a brilliant visualization because almost nothing happens for most of it. So what blows your mind most about that visualization when you just sit back and think about it?
It's a boring book. So 950 pages, 95% of the book, hunter-gatherers kind of doing their thing. I'm sure there's obviously some major cognitive and advancements along the way in language. And I'm sure, the bow and arrow comes around at some point, so tiny things, but it's like, oh, now we 400 pages till the next thing. But then you get to page 950 and things start moving.
Recorded history starts at 976.
Right.
So basically the bottom row is when anything interesting happens. There's a bunch of agriculture for a while before we know anything about it. And then recorded history starts.
Yeah, 25 pages of actual recorded history. So when we think of prehistoric, we're talking about pages 1 through 975 of the book. And then history is page 976 to 1000. If you were reading the book, it would be like epilogue AD, the last little 10 pages of the book. And we think of AD as super long, right? 2,000 years, the Roman Empire, 2,000 years ago. That's so long.
Yeah.
Human history has been going on for over 2,000 centuries. It's hard to wrap your head around. And this is, even that's just the end of a very long road. The 100,000 years before that, it's not like that was that different. So it's just, there's been people like us that have emotions like us, that have physical sensations like us, for so long. And who are they all? And what was their life like? And it's, I think we have no idea what it was like to be them. The thing that's craziest about the people of the far past is not just that they had different lives, they had different fears, they had different dangers and different responsibilities, and they lived in tribes and everything, but they didn't know anything. We just take it for granted that we're born on top of this tower of knowledge. And from the very beginning, we know that the earth is a ball floating in space. And we know that we're going to die one day. And we know that, we evolved from animals, and all those were all incredible, epiphanies quite recently. And the people a long time ago, they just had no idea what was going on. And I'm kind of jealous because I feel like it might have been scary to not know what's going on, but it also, I feel like, would be, you'd have a sense of awe and wonder all the time. And you don't know what's going to happen next. And once you learn, you're kind of like, oh, it's a little grim.
But they probably had the same capacity for consciousness to experience the world, to wander about the world, maybe to construct narratives about the world and myths and so on. They just had less grounded systematic facts to play with. They still probably felt the narratives, the myths they constructed as intensely as we do.
Oh, yeah. They also fell in love.
Yeah.
They also had friends, and they had falling outs with friends.
They didn't shower much, though.
They did not smell nice.
Or maybe they did. Maybe beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all relative.
So how many people in history have experienced a hot shower? Almost none. That's when were hot showers invented? 100 years ago? Less? So George Washington never had a hot shower.
Yeah.
It's just kind of weird. He took cold showers all the time,
Yeah.
And again, we just take this for granted, but that's an unbelievable life experience to have a controlled little booth where it rains hot water on your head. And then you get out and it's not everywhere. It's contained. That was a lot of people probably lived and died with never experiencing hot water. Maybe they had a way to heat water over a fire, but then I don't know. It's just there's so many things about our lives now that are just total anomaly.
It makes you wonder, what is the thing that would notice the most? The sewage system, it doesn't smell in cities.
It's incredible.
What does a sewer system do? It gets rid of waste efficiently such that we don't have to confront it, both with any of our senses. And that's probably wasn't there. What else? Plus all the medical stuff associated with sewage.
How about the disease?
Yeah.
How about the cockroaches and the rats and the disease and the plagues and and then when they caught more diseases, but then when they caught the disease, they also didn't have treatment for it. So they often would die, or they would just be in a huge amount of pain. They also didn't know what the disease was. They didn't know about microbes. That was this new thing, the idea that these tiny little animals that are causing these diseases. So what did they think? In the bubonic plague, in the Black Death, the 1300s, people thought that it was an act of God because, God's angry at us. Because why would you not think that if you didn't know what it was? And so the crazy thing is that these were the same primates. So I do know something about them. I know in some sense what it's like to be them because I am a human as well. And to know that this particular primate that I know what it's like to be experienced such different things. And like, this isn't, our life is not the life that this primate has experienced almost ever. So it's just a bit strange.
I don't know. I have a sense that we would get acclimated very quickly. Like if we threw ourselves back a few thousand years ago, it would be very uncomfortable at first. But the whole hot shower thing, you'd get used to it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
after a year, you would not even like miss it. There's a few trying to remember which book that talks about hiking the Appalachian Trail, but you kind of miss those hot showers. But I have a sense like after a few months, after a few years.
Well, your scale recalibrates.
Yeah.
I was saying the other day to a friend that whatever you're used to, you start to think that, the people that have more than me or are more fortunate, like, it just sounds incredible. I would be so happy. But that's not true because you've experienced what would happen is you would get these new things, or you would get these new opportunities, and then you would get used to it, and then the hedonic treadmill, you'd come back to where you are. And likewise, though, because you think, oh my God, what if I had to, have this kind of job that I never would want, or I had this kind of marriage that I never would want. You know what? If you did, you would adjust and you get used to it, and you might not be that much less happy than you are now. So on the other side of you being okay going back, we would survive if we had to go back. We'd have to learn some skills, but we would buck up. And people have gone to war before that. Were in the shopkeepers a year before that. They were in the trenches the next year. But on the other hand, if you brought them here, I always think it'd be so fun to just forget the hunter-gatherers, bring a 1700s person here and tour them around, take them on an airplane, show them your phone and all the things it can do, show them the internet, show them the grocery store. Imagine taking them to a Whole Foods. Likewise, I think they would be completely awestruck and on their knees crying tears of joy. Mm-hmm. And then they'd get used to it and they'd be complaining about you don't have this oranges in stock, because and that's
the grocery store is a tough one to get used to. Like when I first came to this country, the abundance of bananas was the thing that struck me the most, or like fruits in general, but food in general, but bananas somehow struck me the most, that you could just eat them as much as you want. That took a long time for me. Probably took several years to really like get acclimated to that.
Why didn't you have bananas?
The number of fresh bananas, that wasn't available. Bread, yes. Bananas, no.
Yeah, it's like we don't even know what to have. Like, we don't even know the proper levels of gratitude.
Yeah.
Walking around the grocery store, I don't know to be like, the bread's nice, but the bananas are like, we're so lucky. I don't know. I'm like, I could have been the other way. I have no idea.
Well, it's interesting then where we point our gratitude in the West, in the United States. Probably, do we point it away from materialist possessions towards, or do we just aspire to do that towards other human beings that we love? Because in the East, in the Soviet Union, growing up poor, it's having food is the gratitude. Having transportation is gratitude. Having warmth and shelter is gratitude. And now, but see, within that, the deep gratitude is for other human beings. It's the penguins huddling together for warmth in the cold.
I think it's a person by person basis. I mean, I'm sure, yes, of course, in the West, we will on average feel gratitude towards different things, or maybe a different level of gratitude. Maybe we feel less gratitude than countries that, obviously, I think the person that's most likely to feel gratitude is going to be someone whose life happens to be one where they just move up throughout their life. A lot of people in the greatest generation, people who were born in the 20s or whatever, and a lot of the boomers too. The story is the greatest generation grew up dirt poor, and they often ended up middle class. And the boomers, some of them started off middle class, and many of them ended up quite wealthy. And I feel like that life trajectory is naturally going to foster gratitude, right? Because you're not going to take for granted these things because you didn't have them. I didn't go out of the country really in my childhood very much. We traveled, but it was to Virginia to see my grandparents, or Wisconsin to see other relatives, or maybe Florida if we're going on to the beach. And then I started going out of the country like crazy in my 20s because I really became my favorite thing. And I feel like because if I had grown up always doing that, it would have been another thing. I'm like, yeah, that's just something I do. But I still, every time I go to a new country, I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm in another country. This thing I've only seen on the map. I'm like, I'm there now. And so I feel like it's a lot of times it's a product of what you didn't have and then you suddenly had. But I still think it's case by case in that there's like a meter in everyone's head, that I think at a 10, you're experiencing just immense gratitude, right? Which is a euphoric feeling. It's a great feeling. And it makes you happy. It's to savor what you have, to look down at the mountain of stuff you have that you're standing on, right? To look down at it and say, oh my God, I'm so lucky. And I'm so grateful for this and this and this. And obviously that's a happy exercise. Now, when you move the meter down to 6 or 7, maybe you think that sometimes, but you're not always thinking that, because you're sometimes looking up at this cloud of things that you don't have, and the things that they have but you don't, or the things you wished you had or you thought you were going to have, or whatever. And that's the opposite direction to look, right? And that's that's envy, that's yearning, or often it's if you think about your past, it's grievance. Yeah. Right. And so then you go into a 1 and you have someone who feels like a complete victim. They are just a victim of the society, of their siblings and their parents and their loved one. And they are they're wallowing in everything that's happened wrong to me, everything I should have that I don't, everything that has gone wrong for me. And so that's a very mentally unhealthy place to be. Anyone can go there. There's an endless list of stuff it can be aggrieved about, and an endless list of stuff you can have gratitude for. And so it's in some ways it's a choice and it's a habit. And maybe it's part of how we were raised or our natural demeanor, but it's such a good You are really good at this, by the way. Your Twitter is like,
go on.
Well, you are constantly just saying, man, I'm lucky. Or like, I'm so grateful for this. And it's a good thing to do because you're reminding yourself, but you're also reminding other people to think that way. And it's like, we are lucky, and so anyway, I think that scale can go from 1 to 10, and I think it's hard to be a 10. I think you'd be very happy if you could be, but I think trying to be above a 5 and looking down at the things you have more often than you are looking up at the things you don't, or being, resentful about the things that people have wronged you. And
well, the interesting thing, I think, was an open question, but I suspect that you can control that knob for the individual. Like you yourself can choose. It's like the Stoic philosophy. You could choose where you are as a matter of habit, like you said. But you can also probably control that on a scale of a family, of a tribe, of a nation, of a society. I mean, you can describe a lot of the things that happened in Nazi Germany and different other parts of history through a sort of societal envy and resentment that builds up. Maybe certain narratives pick up and then they infiltrate your mind, and then now your knob goes to, from the gratitude for everything, it goes to resentment and envy and all the
Germany between the 2 world wars. Yeah. Like you said, the Soviet kind of mentality. So yeah, and then when you're soaking in a culture, so there's kind of 2 factors, right? It's what's going on in your own head, and then what's surrounding you. And what's surrounding you kind of has concentric circles. There's your immediate group of people, because that group of people, if they're a certain way, if they feel a lot of gratitude and they talk about it a lot, that kind of insulates you from the broader culture, because the people are going to have the most impact on you are the ones closest. But often they're all the concentric circles are saying the same thing. The people around you are feeling the same way that the broader community, which is feeling the same way as the broader country. I think this is why I think American patriotism, nationalism, can be tribal, can be very not a good thing. Patriotism, I think is a great thing, because really, what is patriotism? I mean, it's, if you love your country, you should love your fellow countrymen. Patriot, that's a Reagan quote. It's like patriotism is like, I think, a feeling of like unity, but it also comes along with an implicit kind of concept of gratitude, because it's like we are so lucky to live in, people, think it's chauvinist to say we live in the best country in the world, right? And, yes, when Americans say that, no one likes it, right? But actually, it's not a bad thing to think. It's a nice thing to think. It's a way of saying, I'm so grateful for all the great things this country gives to me and this country has done. And I think, if you heard a Filipino person say, you know what, the Philippines is the best country in the world, no one in America would say that's chauvinist. They'd say awesome, right? Because when it's coming from someone, who's not American, it sounds totally fine. But I think, national pride is actually good. Now, again, that can quickly translate into xenophobia and nationalism. And so, you have to make sure it doesn't go off that cliff. But
yeah, there's good ways to formulate that. Like we'll talk about like high rung progressivism, high rung conservatism. Those are two different ways of embodying patriotism. So you could talk about maybe loving the tradition that this country stands for, or you could talk about loving the people, that ultimately push progress. And those are, from an intellectual perspective, a good way to represent patriotism.